The African sun blazed low over the savanna, casting long golden shadows across the tall grass. Heat shimmered on the horizon, but all was still eerily still. A single lion stood in the open, his massive frame trembling. Blood streaked his tawny coat, matting the fur around a fresh shoulder wound. One eye was half closed, swollen, yet burning with fierce clarity. 20 feet away, Ranger Elias held his rifle steady, finger taut on the trigger. Sweat dripped from his brow, not from the heat but from the weight of this moment. Lion and man locked eyes. Time stretched, neither moved. A strange recognition flickered between them by predator and prey. It was something older, deeper, pain, memory, guilt. The lion's breathing slowed. He didn't growl, he didn't retreat. Elias's grip faltered, he exhaled slowly, lowering the barrel. "What the hell are you doing?" A voice crackled through his radio. He didn't answer. Couldn't. The lion took a single step forward. Elias didn't raise the rifle. Another step closer. The lion blinked once and turned, limping into the brush, leaving a trail of red in the dust. Elias stood frozen, the weight of his rifle now heavier than ever. Somewhere deep inside him, something had shifted. This wasn't just a wounded animal. This was the beginning of an old story clawing its way back to life. 10 years earlier, the jungle at the edge of the savanna buzzed with the low hum of flies. Smoke curled above a crude poacher's camp, its embers still warm. The stench of blood hung in the air, thick and metallic. Ranger Elias, 25, lean, and still clinging to idealism, moved cautiously between the scattered remains of what had been a family of lions. 2 adults slaughtered, their bodies stripped for trophies. His jaw clenched. Then he heard it. A whimper, soft, desperate. He turned toward the sound, heart quickening. Pushing aside a torn canvas tarp, he found it curled into a ball, ribs showing through golden fur. A lion cub, barely breathing. Its eyes opened just enough to meet his. Wide and clouded with terror, Elias dropped to his knees. Its tiny body was covered in dirt and dried blood, but uninjured. Beside it, a bullet-riddled lioness, its mother. No backup, no permits, no vet. Elias muttered aloud, thinking fast. This wasn't protocol. He should report it. Call wildlife services. Let nature, brutal, merciless, nature take its course. But he couldn't. He reached for the cub. It flinched, then whimpered again, too weak to resist. "It's okay. You're okay now," he whispered, voice cracking. Later that night, in a hidden storage room beneath the ranger outpost, Elias held the cub close against his chest, feeding it a mixture of formula from a syringe. Its paws twitched in sleep. "You're a fighter," he murmured, brushing the dust from its ears. "Shuja, that's what I'll call you." He looked down at the fragile creature nestled in the crook of his arm. A warrior. In that moment, the world outside rules, superiors, poachers, consequences, ceased to matter. All that remained was a bond neither of them should have formed, but one that would change both their fates forever. Days turned into months. Seasons passed in the shadows of the ranger station. Behind locked doors and whispered routines, Elias raised Shuja. He fed him by hand, wiped blood from tiny claws, and watched him grow from a trembling cub into a sleek, powerful adolescent. They wrestled in moonlit clearings, ran through the underbrush. Elias taught him boundaries, and Shuya taught Elias trust. They were no longer man and animal. They were something else. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. Strange prints near the station, reports of a lion seen too close to the fence line. Whispers from fellow rangers. Superiors growing suspicious. Elias knew the time had come. One dawn, beneath a coral pink sky, he drove deep into the heart of the protected zone where poachers never tread and patrols were rare. Shuya sat in the bed of the truck, calm but alert, as if he knew. When Elias opened the gate, Shuya leaped out, prowling into the tall grass, then stopped, turned, their eyes met man and beast. Elias's throat tightened. He managed a smile. "You'll be safer here," he said softly. Free Shuja didn't move. Then, slowly, he padded back a step, just close enough for Elias to rest a trembling hand against his fur. "One last time." "Go," Elias whispered. The lion turned once more, disappearing into the savanna, but not before glancing back one long, final look. In that gaze was 1,000 words Elias would never hear. Love, loss, understanding. And then, he was gone. Elias stood alone in the silence, the sound of the wind brushing through the grass like a lullaby. He had let go of but the bond remained unspoken, unbreakable. Time moved on, but Elias didn't. He patrolled the reserve with mechanical precision, eyes scanning the horizon but never truly seeing. The man who once whispered to a lion cub now barely spoke at all. His wife packed her bags one evening, her voice brittle with disappointment. "You care more about the wild than your own family," she said. Standing in the doorway with tears she no longer tried to hide. Elias didn't argue. He just nodded. She left. The house fell silent. Empty rooms echoed with memories he'd buried too deep to grieve. The other rangers kept their distance. He was respected, never liked. A ghost in uniform. His world narrowed to routine. Patrol, report, repeat, but the savannah whispered. Lions were acting strangely. Attacks on livestock, even signs near human settlements. Too close. Too bold. Locals spoke in hushed tones of a rogue lion, massive, scarred, fearless, a ghost cat haunting the reserve's outer rim. Stories trickled in. A lion that stared down rifles. That killed but never fed. Elias listened but said nothing. In the silence of his mind, one name echoed louder than any rumor: Shuja-8. Had he survived? Had he forgotten? Or had the wild turned him into something else entirely? Whatever the truth, Elias felt it deep in his bones. Something was coming. The call came just after dawn. Another village on the reserve's edge, livestock slaughtered, fences torn down like paper. No tracks. No warning. When Elias arrived, the air was thick with fear. Goats lay mangled in the dirt, untouched by scavengers. Blood pooled beneath them, but none had been eaten. It wasn't hunger. It was something else. A villager approached, trembling, clutching a child close to his side. It wasn't a lion, the man whispered. It was something worse. Elias raised an eyebrow. Worse. The man hesitated, then nodded. Toward the boy. Ask him. The child looked up with wide eyes. It stared at me. It was huge, like the sun behind it. I thought it would kill me. But it didn't. Just looked at me. Then left. Elias crouched, heart pounding. How close? He asked. The boy held up both hands barely 4 feet apart. A chill ran down Elias's spine. He stood, scanning the horizon. The villagers spoke of a monster. A spirit, a ghost lion. But Elias knew better. Shuja. Could it really be him? After all these years? He turned toward the savannah. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it a memory he'd buried long ago. The boy was spared. Why? There was only one lion Elias had ever known who could make a choice like that. And now, it seemed, he had returned. But for what? The sun dipped low, painting the savannah in hues of fire and blood. Elias moved silently through the underbrush. Years of tracking instinct guiding every step. The signs were fresh broken branches, disturbed soil, a trail of bloodless carcasses leading deeper into forbidden land. And then he saw him. A lion stood at the center of a bone-strewn clearing. Massive, scarred, regal, his mane whipped gently in the wind, streaked with silver. Around him, silence. Even the insects dared not stir. Elias stepped forward, rifle raised. The lion turned. Their eyes locked in that instant. Time shattered. Elias saw flashes of a cub curled against his chest, of playfights beneath moonlight, of whispered promises in the dark. The lion before him bore the weight of a decade in his gaze. But behind the weariness, behind the raw power, was memory. Shuja. A low growl rumbled from the lion's chest as he began to move. Slow at first, then faster, charging. Elias didn't move. He raised his rifle, heart hammering, finger on the trigger, muscles coiled, eyes wide. 20 feet, 10, 5. The lion skidded to a stop, dust swirling around him, breathing hard, staring. The barrel of the rifle trembled. They stood frozen, man and beast, past and present, caught in the gravity of recognition. Shuja stepped closer. Just once, Elias lowered his rifle. In the lion's eyes, he saw not a killer. He saw a promise kept, and a question unspoken. Why had he returned, and what would come next? A sudden tremor rippled through Shua's body. He staggered, then collapsed. Dust rose around him as his massive frame hit the earth. A deep, ragged breath tore from his chest, followed by silence. Elias dropped the rifle and ran, the world blurring around him. No, 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 he fell to his knees beside the lion, his hands trembling as he cradled Shua's bloodied head, a wound near the ribs fresh, brutal, not his, a clean bullet. Another ranger's shot. You came back to me, Elias whispered, voice cracking as tears carved lines through the dirt on his cheeks. Shua's golden eyes fluttered open. For a fleeting second, the wild melted away, and all Elias saw was the cub he once held beneath a blanket of stars. The lion lifted his head, just enough to lick Ilias's shaking hand, one final, tender gesture. Then, stillness. The weight of the world seemed to collapse onto Elias's shoulders. Shua's eyes closed and did not open again. Elias bowed his head, forehead against the lion's, the wind around them howling like a cry from the earth itself. The warrior had returned, but not to stay. Elias snapped into motion. Base, this is Ranger Elias, urgent. Medical, I need a vet now. Lion down, but still breathing. He refused to let go. Blood soaked the grass, warm against his knees. Elias pressed his jacket to the wound, voice a steady whisper in Shua's ear. Stay with me, warrior. You've survived worse. Minutes felt like hours, then a roar of an engine. A dusty 4x4 skidded to a stop. The reserve's vet, Dr. Amina, leaped out with her kit. No way we can move him, she said, eyes wide. We do this here, under the open sky, with birds circling overhead. They worked. Amina's hands shook as she stitched torn flesh and pushed injections. Elias never left Shua's side, murmuring soft words. Eyes locked on the barely rising chest. Heartbeat slowing. Breath faltering. Come on, Elias pleaded. Then a twitch, a low, rumbling sound, not quite a roar, but enough. Shua's eyes fluttered, his chest rose. Slowly but surely, he was alive. Barely. Elias exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever, his hands still resting on the lion's mane. Hope had clawed its way back through the dust. The warrior still breathed. Weeks passed. Shu lay recovering under a makeshift canopy, his flank bandaged, golden eyes flickering with cautious strength. He no longer growled at humans, only watched, waiting, trusting one man alone. Elias never left his side. Investigations unfolded. Reports were cross-checked. And slowly, the truth emerged. The livestock killings. Tracks revealed they were the work of rogue lions and scavenging hyenas. The so-called monster hadn't been the predator. He'd been the shield. Villagers began to talk. The fear that once clouded their faces gave way to awe. I saw him chase off 3 hyenas near the school. One woman whispered. He guarded the well when no one else dared go near, said another. Then the village chief stepped forward. His voice was steady, reverent. He is not a beast, he is a guardian. A spirit of the borderlands. Word spread fast, and finally redemption. Elias stood before the reserve board. Boots dusty, voice firm. He saved lives. He deserves to live not as a prisoner, but as a protector. It wasn't easy. But the story, the legend had grown, too large to ignore. Special permission was granted. A protected sanctuary at the reserve's heart was designated as Shua's new home. No cages, no bars, just open land. And Elias, as the transport truck rolled to a stop, the ramp lowered, and Shuja stepped down stronger, slower but proud. Elias stood waiting. Shuja paused, then brushed his massive head against Ilias's chest. A silent thank you and perhaps forgiveness. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the grasslands in molten gold, Elias stood atop a ridge, watching his old friend disappear into the tall grass. But this time, there was no heartbreak, only peace. The warrior had returned, not to haunt, but to protect. The grass swayed gently under the morning breeze, golden and soft, stretching endlessly beneath a pale sky in the heart of the sanctuary. Shua lay nestled among the tall stalks, his scarred body still powerful but at ease. Birds sang above, and for once, there was no urgency in the wind. Calm. Each morning, Elias came. No longer in uniform, no radio, no rifle. Just a man and his notebook. Weathered and full of old field notes and scattered thoughts, some scientific, some deeply personal. He sat cross-legged a few paces from Shu, reading aloud softly, bits of observation, memories, fragments of a younger man's hopes. Sometimes, Shuja would stay still, sometimes, he'd listen, but on this morning, something was different. The lion rose with deliberate grace and padded slowly toward Elias. Elias lowered the notebook, watching Shuja stopped beside him, and then did the unthinkable. He lowered his head and gently rested it in Elias's lap. The ranger froze for a moment, overcome, before placing a hand on the lion's mane. Older now, streaked with white, but warm and alive. Their eyes met, no fear, no wildness, no distance. Just understanding, just peace. For a long time, they remained like that, two survivors, shaped by choices no one else would understand. bound by something stronger than words. The sun climbed higher, bathing them in light, and then fade to black. A single line appears on screen. Sometimes, loyalty outlives fear.